It's good to be here with you guys back home in Atlanta, back from DC. DC was wild. Really wild. One thing I will say, and I have a series of interviews that'll be posted soon with vignettes and perspectives from different women and some men who either participated in one of the marches or chose not to for whatever reasons. But I really do think that, just to take a moment about DC, like being on the ground, one thing that really bothered me was the framing of the resistance as beginning on Saturday, right, with the culmination of the women's march or in the sister marches. From a really just most basic standpoint, that was a really great, effort, and coordination. There were 600 plus marches organized worldwide. That's pretty impressive. Shout out to Terry and Cece and some of the other women who helped coordinate the sister marches. I know quite a few of them, and even got to speak on one of their phone calls to talk about community engagement along with Cori Bush. But really, I mean, there's been a lot of activity. There was a whole week of actions and resistance from Disrupt J20, from Answer Coalition, from Black Lives Matter and Movement for Black Lives affiliated groups. There's been so much going on. And so a lot of the criticism that exists around the Women's March, like the National DC March in general, I think extends to this whole way that mainstream organizations, the Democrats and the media approach this idea of resistance and fighting the good fight, so to speak. It is very focused on establishment approved actions and activities, and it really overlooks the real work, advocacy and organizing being done on a regular basis. Like, again, the day before, you had Disrupted J20 actions happening from first thing in the morning on over. And when you're talking about like real actual resistance, putting it on the line, like, the different blocks, the different blockades and stuff led by various groups, Code Pink out in the street. I mean, Black Lives Matter activists, labor activists, so much was going on Friday. And that really got overshadowed by a couple of different events that were only a small fraction of what actually happened. Shout out to Occupy inauguration. Sorry, Brandon, but really some great work that was done. They got overlooked. Go ahead, Brandon.
But I mean, that's the word of the day, erasure, right? And that's been the word of the day for a long time. The Women's March, in a lot of ways, was establishment stamp of approval march that most easily can be co-opted by the Democratic Party and the liberal media as being, the approved resistance. Like that's what the Women's March is. Like, it's the establishment approved proper way to resist. Just like MSNBC is the proper channel to, it's the proper news source to resist with. And in a lot of ways, that's very problematic, right? So as part of the real resistance, right, the people who exist actually on the fringes of the status quo and are resisting that status quo, resisting that struggle in place, not simply just Trump himself, it becomes us to, also resist this narrative, right? That the Democrats are the one legitimate form, the one legitimate path to resistance, because that's really what they're trying to establish now, right? With Debbie Wasserman Schultz getting out there with her stage photos and Cori Bush getting out there with his pink scarf and his stage photos. They're trying to position, themselves as literally, we are the only way. We are all standing between you and Trump, and they've done that before too. That was their campaign slogan during the general election. We are what stands between you and Trump, and so you got to get behind us. And that's still their message going forth. Like, we are the one legitimate path to resistance. And for progressives, we have to, part of our struggle with the establishment is going to be literally wresting control over not just the term resistance, but the definition of leftists from the Democrats, because right now they have the monopoly on it. They have the monopoly on what constitutes resistance. They have the monopoly on what constitutes what it means to be on the left, and they have bastardized those terms. And the Women's March, although I'm not here to cajole any of the rank and file people who this was their first march. Trump ignited their spirit in them, and that's wonderfully okay. But the issue becomes, the Democrats are not really the solution to Trump. They are just an alternative way to, all right, they're just a slightly worse alternative. Like we need to talk about solutions, not less bad problems right now. And
Agreed. I think that's absolutely right. And I really do think that there are so many think pieces that are already coming out about the different issues with the Women's March. And again, like I've said to so many people already, I do have my thoughts. And I still have another piece in front of it that I did not get finished still yet. But I do think that we need to continue to discuss these issues. We do need to call out false narratives. I can, criticize or offer critique of the march, but at the same time, offer criticism and critique of the way, for example, that Linda Sarsour has been, treated and railroaded by people from multiple fronts who are just upset about various things. Like and it's not about, and again, like people get into the, respectability politics. It's not about respectability. Like there's just a lack of decency and respect for people and what they do. I don't have to agree with you to respect you. Right. And no, I'm not about to lecture people about how you should have punched Nazis. I just want to just to wrap up the DC stuff just real quickly. So I think we're up to, I think it's 4 now. Several journalists were arrested during coverage of the unrest on Friday, and they've been charged with felony rioting, which carries a jail term up to 10 years, I believe, and a fine of like $25,000 for just merely coverage. And the National Lawyers Guild, which I need to go ahead and submit my stuff to join, stated that the Washington, D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department has they indiscriminately target people for arrest en masse based on location alone. And if anyone heard Ben and I on Eugene Puryear's show on Friday afternoon, like as we were on air, this was happening in process. They were beginning the process of kettling people into a particular area. So, like things would happen and people would get drawn into like the area, and then the police would surround and basically cordon it off and trap people and then just arrest everyone en masse. So, while there may have been things going on that were allegedly illegal that gave police the right to arrest people, that's up for interpretation or not. But to arrest, identify journalists who are there just providing coverage, that opens up a whole nother conversation about constitutional rights, about the First Amendment, and about the freedom of the press and the ability to actually provide real-time updated information and news on what's going on the ground. So that's something that we definitely need to keep more eye on. And considering this administration and this president's interesting relationship with news media, that isn't, I saw that with the CIA press conference, he had his own his own laugh machine. He basically had his own live studio. He had his own recorded studio audience brought in for him. So we're in for a lot of real interesting times ahead. So we can get on to the topics for the night. But I just found that was just an article I had seen from earlier that I thought was just really interesting in The Guardian.